Hello, and welcome to the Farmhouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
Today, we're talking to Kansas farmer and crop research scientist Melissa Nelson Baldwin. She's the owner of Performance Crop Research, LLC, in Great Bend, Kansas, where she and her team conduct field trials, seed development, and more.
Melissa also is a co-founder of South Bend Industrial Hemp, which is a fiber hemp processing facility that has opened up new possibilities for farmers in central Kansas. She farms with her husband and his family on their fourth-generation farm, where they're farming about 3,000 acres, a mix of corn, soy, wheat, and now industrial hemp. She's also the host of a monthly radio show about farming on Eagle Radio 99.5 FM in Great Bend, Kansas. Let's bring Melissa Nelson Baldwin into the Farmhouse. Melissa, welcome to the Farmhouse. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So it is early November as we're recording this, and here in Pennsylvania, our harvest has pretty much wrapped up, or is at least getting pretty close to being done. Obviously, you're in Kansas, so how are things going in Kansas with your harvest season? What's going on there?
So Kansas kind of followed, and so did our farm, kind of the national. Everybody's way ahead of schedule. If you looked at the last USDA report, typically this time of year, and I'm averaging corn and soybeans, but it's typically about 78% of harvest is done across the U.S. This year, it's between 88 and 94% between corn and soybeans. We are well above that. My research company, we've been done for about 10 days. The farm side of things is finishing up some last dryland corners today, but a lot of people's milo's out. We're wrapping up harvest here. We had zero rain delays for as much moisture as a lot of the country had at the beginning of the year. We had absolutely none during harvest.
I guess saying no rain delays is a nice way of
Right,
looking at it.
kind
A
of a
silver lining.
Blessing and a curse, the no rain.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I could have used a nap like halfway through October. I was like, wow, we are just rolling right through. But at the same time, it was really nice to see, like, we do bar graphs each week, just because it helps break down this monumental task that we have to get done, to more bite-sized pieces. And so it was really nice to see that bar chart really start filling up. And
So how many acres do you harvest? Because I think, at least for us in PA, we're used to a bit of a smaller acreage than the footprint that I'm guessing you have out in the Midwest.
Yeah, you have to think. I mean, we have enough acres to definitely keep us busy. And when I talk, there's always two sides to everything. So my research company, we use a research combine. We are collecting data on like a small plot basis. So every 10 by 30 or 10 by 40 feet on average, that's considered a plot. So, we have tens of thousands of plots. It takes us 6 weeks basically harvesting every single day for us to be able to get across that. We've got 3 locations across the state. So the good news is if there was a rain delay, we could always bump to another place in Kansas and probably be able to cut there. And then in terms of the farm side with my husband and my brother-in-law, definitely enough acres to keep us busy. And yes, the Kansas farm average is significantly bigger than Pennsylvania's farm average.
Right. So did you grow up on a farm, or how did you get into agriculture?
Kind of grew up on a farm. My mom and dad both had full-time jobs off of our we would be more like hobby farmers growing up. We had cattle. I was very active in 4-H, FFA, horses, horse judging, really big in the community, and just advocating for agriculture through the different clubs that I was in. That's something that I've always been very, very passionate about. Our ground was more for hay, brome, like fescue pasture type stuff, hay ground. But then I met my husband and out in central Kansas, and they're 4th-generation farmers. And the reason I got brought out to central Kansas is I actually took a job at a research facility out here. I told my then employer that, the only corn that I was really familiar with was like corn rations and finishing cattle and things like that. And he said, that's fine. We really want you for your science background, and we could teach you the cropping side of things. And so I really just fell in love with it and just immersed myself completely in row crops and learning how to be successful at farming.
Very cool. So, speaking of research, tell us about performance crop research and some of the trials that you're doing.
Okay, so this is my baby. I absolutely love what I do. I feel extremely blessed to have just kind of fallen in this industry and then really was able to pinpoint it down. So Performance crop research, I started in 2018, but I've been in the crop research space since 2013. And performance crop research is an independent contract research company. So we work with clients from all over the world on their developmental pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually do an array of things. So herbicides, so we study weeds. We'll look at fungicides, so we'll study diseases in crops. Insecticides, so insects. Biostimulants are taking a larger share of the market, so that we've adapted and moved into the biostimulant space as well. And then also on the backside, you have to think of like regulated crops. So these are new genetic lines or CRISPR methods. So, this plant has been slightly altered, whether it's gene editing or an actual like gene, like they change out the genes. But anyway, we work on that back end to help that client collect that data, which will eventually be supplied to the EPA and will allow for commercial approval.
Are there any specialty crops that you guys are working on? If you're taking clients from around the world, I would imagine that you get to grow some things that normally you wouldn't see grown, maybe even in the United States, but maybe not in Kansas.
Yeah, so we actually, if you can grow it in Kansas, I've probably done it. Carrots, cantaloupe, sugar beets, and then obviously like corn, wheat, soybeans, milo. Industrial hemp is a huge passion and another company that I'm a part of. So we do some hemp trials in the cannabinoid and the fiber and grain space. One thing that you have to think about when these clients are creating that label for the EPA, they want you to grow crops that are quote unquote normal for your region. And so if you see spinach and lettuce and things like that. Like I've done cabbage trials here, but you don't see large commercial acres of cabbage. So a client is not going to take the resources to collect data on a crop that really doesn't have a foundation in that area, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So obviously, I mean, you work with a large variety of clients, as you were just saying. And so with all the different research and testing you've been doing recently, what are some of the things that have stood out to you as top concerns of the clients that you've been working with?
What's really neat is most of the work that I do is like 5 to 10 years out. So and I've been in the game long enough that I'm actually seeing some of these market or products come to market, and not every product goes to market. Sometimes we give them feedback and they're like, wow, we should nix putting our resources into a product like this and put it someplace that's going to be more successful. But sustainability, I mean, you guys are seeing that now, or even if you're like not in the ag world, consumers are calling for more sustainable growing methods and things like that. A caveat to that is I think a lot of people don't understand farming and how that process works. So some of the things that they're calling for aren't 100% possible, but you do see nitrogen reduction. You do see a lot of biostimulants taking the place of conventional pesticides. And, that's kind of the market trend that's happening right now.
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, that is what people are asking for. So obviously you have to at least sort of figure out a way to try and,
I mean, you have to kind of guess. Because like I said, to get a product approved, it's 5 to 7 years minimum. And so these companies spend billions of dollars, and have whole teams on guessing on where the market trends are going to be so they can curtail that developmental pipeline to meet that need.
I'm sure most people, like I definitely didn't know how far in advance this stuff is. I mean, I'm sure most people have no idea that you guys are, I mean, essentially you have to guess, which is, gosh, that's got to be a lot. But I mean, there's obviously so much research and stuff that goes into these guesses. It's not random, obviously. So
no, they're very educated, but I mean, GM products have always genetically modified, those have always been kind of taboo the way Monsanto rolled that out. And so you're seeing shifts there. You're seeing the EPA call for different shifts and trying to take away tools in the farmer's toolbox, like different insecticides or dicamba has been a big product this year because there is a whole line of soybeans that are genetically engineered to be able to, you can spray dicamba on it because soybeans are a broadleaf and the weeds that you're trying to kill are also a broadleaf. And so they have the trait to be able to metabolize that chemical and not kill them. And then the weeds don't. The EPA is wanting to take away that tool. And so essentially all the money that those clients spent in putting into dicamba tolerant soybeans would really be unnecessary. And as a farmer, we have to combat those weeds. We cannot go out and hand weed. You're talking thousands of acres. There was approximately 90 million soybean acres that went in this year. Yes, you're going to have some conventional organic acres that don't use that pesticide, but a large majority of those acres are GM crops. And so you've got to have an answer for them, because if you reduce that yield, you reduce the profitability, you turn around, prices are going to go up. Soybeans are in more than just, tofu and things like that. Soybean oil, it's a domino effect. And if the consumers are calling for reduced pesticides, are they willing to pay for it on the back end when their products become more expensive because yields reduce? It's a supply demand type thing.
Right.
I don't think that's been totally thought through, especially with people already struggling economically.
Yeah. And I think that's very accurate. I think people, like you said, they don't really have a solid idea of what it takes to farm. They're more concerned with the bottom line. How much is, this product going to cost me? And I think you see it too with like on the produce side of things, where, people are concerned about who is picking the fruit, but they don't realize that if you don't want to have to pay for, a $5 orange, you need to get the right people in there to pick the fruit.
I mean, this year, the United States became a net importer of food, which is absolutely insane to me. But I mean, if you shift gears, and we have some cattle, so I'm, a little versed on this, but like, the USDA is calling for more regulations with cattle and tracking and the paperwork that's required of those, which in turn is going to make that beef more expensive to produce for the American farmer. So instead of people paying for that increased priced product, we're actually importing more beef from Brazil and Argentina to be able to keep those prices down in the grocery store. And so it's like, there's no rules and regulations over there. And so you really don't know what products you're getting at all. And so you won't pay for the products that you're asking for these regulations to be put on, but you're willing to pay for the unknown meat that's coming in from other countries. That's I just get so passionate about that. I love American farmers, and I love what they do and what we do. And we want to make the consumers happy, but at the end of the day, like, we can't work for free.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's a lot of complexity and nuance that I don't think people often take the time to think about.
Oh, yeah.
They should.
I mean, it's more than that. Go read your toothpaste ingredients. You can find corn in your toothpaste. Like, it's everywhere. Our crops, everything that's touching you, food, fuel, fiber, that is coming from somewhere on the farm, whether it's a byproduct or the purpose of the plant growing or the animal.
Something else that gets a lot of attention, especially recently, is weather and climate within the ag industry. And we already talked about how dry it's been, and drought has been pretty widespread throughout the entire country. We've had drought issues in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm sure you guys have had your fair share of drought issues as well. So how does the changing climate and the weather extremes that come from it factor into the work you're doing with performance crop research?
We're definitely looking at that too. I mean, drought resistant, different crops are starting to come online, drought stress mitigators. So whether that be through biostimulants, we're testing different formulations and rates for those. So we see the ag industry trying to help farmers make that adjustment. I do kind of have to laugh though, because climate has always been changing. Like, climate change is not new, because if you look back from the beginning of time, the climate has always been changing. I do think it's interesting as well when you start talking climate change and carbon emissions, et cetera. Agriculture is extremely efficient. We are one of the smallest producers of carbon output, and in terms of sustainability and climate change, like, the ag industry has always been very forthcoming and trying to be positive in that space. Like, an example of that, on our farm, we've been doing cover crops for over a decade. Those just started getting popular a couple of years ago. And so you have these celebrities that are making these fads or these pushes on something that they've read, when they don't realize that a lot of farmers have been utilizing these methods for quite some time. a farmer at the end of the day, we're only good as what we have to leave on to the next generation. Like they take a lot of pride, and we take a lot of pride in investing in the future, whether it be our children or our grandchildren. And so we're never going to actively just try to decimate our ground or anything like that, because if we reduce the value of that ground, then we have nothing to pass on. So I think some people lose that thought when they go there, but that's a little off the climate change topic. Climate's always been changing. Every year that I've been farming, I've had a farmer say, "I've never seen the climate like this before. We've never seen it like this." And so that's just one of the challenges that is a part of the industry, and we do our best. And I would love to see a more wholesome approach to quote unquote climate change. They're asking for farmers and methane and cattle and things like that, but we don't see the transportation industry changing, and they're like 40% of carbon emissions. We don't see people in the cities making lifestyle changes. At least I don't, and maybe they do. But I would love to see a more wholesome approach to that.
Right, so switching gears a little, why don't you go ahead and tell us about South Bend Industrial Hemp and what made you and your family decide to get into hemp?
Yeah, so hemp is also another pet project that we have outside of performance crop research. So like I said, my husband and my brother-in-law are fourth generation farmers, and so they have Circle K Farm. And they were looking for a way to diversify their farming operation in 2018. Crop prices were essentially the same. And so profitability was really marginalized. And so we were looking for a different opportunity for our farm, to a new crop, a new cash crop, a new way to be profitable. They came to me because at that time, Kansas was a research only permit. And with my background together, we created South Bend Industrial Hemp. We started with a focus for just growing for ourselves and then selling it to a processor. We've always been very passionate about the fiber space. We never really got into the CBD craze and all that was entailed with that, because we really approached it from a farmer mentality. Like, what equipment did we already have? How do we get into this with the least amount of expenses possible to mitigate our risk? Because you didn't have crop insurance, there's no subsidies or anything like that. So you had to be very conscious, financially of how you were going to approach this. So we've always been fiber focused because we knew that Kansas could really excel in that area. We had a processor back out on us, and we continued to see that as a problem across the industry. And so we decided to open our own processing facility. And now we work with farmers from all over the Midwest. We help them with a seed to final sale, agronomic support, really whatever they need throughout the season to be successful. And then we purchase their hemp crop.
Great. So I also heard that you got your neighbors to start growing hemp as well. How did you go about doing that?
We've always approached hemp. We're not salespeople. I don't have time to come and try to convince you to grow hemp for us or anything like that. We have only shared our story and very transparent on social media, the positives, the pitfalls, some challenges that we've incurred, et cetera. We just started educating. We started having open houses and field days, and the response was very positive. Our local radio station gave us a platform for the first Tuesday of every month. We've had a radio show now for 4 years, where we go in and we talk about the hemp industry and some changes that we're seeing, and then what we're seeing on the farming side and what our farmers are seeing. So we only work with farmers that come to us and want to grow hemp. And so that's kind of been a different mentality than some other facilities that go out and like actively try to recruit those acres. We want to work with farmers that want to diversify their farm.
So yeah, like as a processor, you're processing hemp into raw materials, hurd and bast, what can people use those materials for? Like, a lot of people are not super familiar with industrial hemp. So what can those materials be used for? And then what's really the benefit of using hemp in those ways?
Hemp can be used for, if you look at the posters, over 50,000 different things. I don't particularly love that because I'm like, okay, well, name 10. But so we do, our hurd is used a lot for animal bedding, insulation. I see you have hemp behind you.
Yes, we do. Our insulation panels are made out of hemp. And actually, we were told that they were processed through your facility. So it's like you're here in the studio with us.
Our focus has always really been hurd production, again, with the type of growing. And then you have to think, where are the manufacturers? Where can you be successful? We're not close to any textile mills or anything like that. That's more on the East Coast. So we knew we weren't growing for textile grade fiber. But what we do have around here is a lot of people that are building houses, a lot of animal barns and, horse barns and things like that. And so we chase the herd side of the market. And that's really where I would say we are more of an expertise in that space. You've got your hemp wood, which are around your little soundboards back there as well. That, that's a Kentucky company that makes that happen. But really just supplying the country with whatever product that they need, hemp boards, plywood, or it'd be like hemp plywood, reclamation projects, really whatever they think they can use hemp for. When we first started, we actually had Aaron worked a lot with like developmental departments and companies. Like we had people that wanted to make hemp diapers and they came to us and they're like, how do we do this? And I'm like, I have no idea. I've never made a non-hemp diaper, but I can send you samples and we can try to figure out the specs for your machines to make that successful. So we spent a lot of time the first few years doing that and working closely with companies. We do that on a small scale now. For the most part, we've got large scale orders that are going out, by the semi truckload.
So, obviously you have a lot of expertise on hemp, but then on also like grain crops. So what are some similarities and differences when it comes to growing industrial hemp on a commercial scale versus growing the crops that people are more familiar with, like corn and soybeans?
The biggest difference is hemp for fiber production is going to be very similar to any type of hay or a forage crop. So, you're going to use your drill that you're putting in wheat or beans. You're going to be planting, 700,000 seeds per acre plus, up to like 1.2 million, depending on the application for the hemp. You're going to be using the same swather, rake, and baler that you're going to use for any of your other crops, whether you're doing corn stalks or anything like that. I would say the biggest difference is your nutrient program. But again, nutrient programs are different for every crop and then subsequently different for every single field, because different fields need different things based on soil type. So it's going to be very similar to a corn crop, but less nutrient total.
How can other farmers best add hemp into their current rotations? Or is that very dependent on where everyone is and soil and all of that?
It can be dependent. Again, we really promote like tool in the toolbox. Is there a field that you need to rotate out? So for example, if you grow corn on corn on corn on corn and you do that consistently, like they do in the I states and really in Kansas in some spaces as well, you're introducing insects and disease pressure because you're not getting that rotational crop. Is it something that you take that corn out for a year and you put in hemp? Do you have some bean fields that maybe don't produce as well, whether it be soil type or stress, whether it can't handle the stress, the drought stress or something like that? Hemp would be a good place to, interchange that. So you kind of just have to look at a base by base. There's no like blanket statement, like you should follow it after beans or before corn or something like that. It's really just where are you needing to utilize a different crop on your farm?
Sounds like it's something that almost anyone could get into if they would have interest. Yeah. So that's always cool.
Yeah. The biggest thing is just, do you have a drill? And like, we don't even own our own baling equipment. We have the swather and the rake, but we hire custom balers to come in, and these custom balers put up millions of bales across the country or, across Kansas in our area. And so, why go reinvent the wheel when they've got it already? And so we just pay them a cost per bale and they come and bale our hemp.
Yes. All right. So when we were, doing some research ahead of this interview, I saw online, it looks like you're pretty passionate about fitness. And
No.
On the surface, it might seem like farming is a workout in and of itself, and it certainly can be at times, but other times it might be just sitting in a tractor cab for hours. So I guess my question is, how do you see farming and fitness coming together?
I'm a huge proponent of, mental health and physical health, what you're putting in your body. And again, this isn't like an organic conversation or anything like that. It's, are you eating whole foods? Are you eating out of a gas station, when you're running through town to the next field? And so I just try to be very conscious of my protein levels, making sure I'm getting, your healthy fats in. and good carb sources. And when I say good, I just mean like not just candy all the time, which don't get me wrong, I have candy, but like, your breads or your potatoes and things like that. And so I feel like I really love to treat my body as kind of a machine. I mean, ultimately that's what it is. And so are you fueling your machine for maximum output? And I ask a lot of my body and my brain. And so I need to make sure that I'm fueling it correctly to do that. And then, farming is stressful. Running your own business is stressful. Developing a new industry, stressful. So the weights and the running really kind of help curtail that. And, it's just, you have to mitigate stress, because if you're not healthy, then you can't help other people or other farms, or you really can't help anybody.
And it's a lot. I mean, like you just said, you're farming, you're running a business, you're helping to, kickstart an industry. How do you find time for it all? How do you strike that balance?
I learned a lot a long time ago that don't say yes to everything. And I am very, very protective of my peace. So if you are not adding value, to my life or whatever, like if you're not positive, and I'm not saying you have to be like rah rah every day, but as a whole, if you aren't helping contribute to the day type things, then I'm not going to take the time to be around you. I just, and not that those people are bad, they're just not on the same train that I'm on right now. And right now I am on the express and I have a lot of things to accomplish in a very short amount of time. Like, you never know, every day is not given. And so I'm like, how do I maximize my day? How do I be the best that I can be? And ultimately do my job in the best way possible. So I just started saying no. If going to the bars on Friday night didn't help me achieve my goals, no. If that food source was like not going to help me achieve my goals, no. And so you just get really good at saying no.
Yeah, it's good advice.
I love that. The power of no.
Yeah.
I mean, no is a statement.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't have to justify it to anybody else. You don't have to explain it. You just say, no, thank you.
I love that. All right. So we're almost done here on our last question. And that is, what does being a woman in ag mean to you?
That is a double-edged sword. I don't like to pigeonhole myself too much. Like, don't get me wrong. I am so proud to be a woman. I'm so proud to be in agriculture, but that doesn't define who I am within agriculture. I thankfully have a very supportive husband because I'm pretty independent. Like, I will figure it out. And if, I'm not afraid to learn or fail to learn. So for me, I just see myself as, someone in the agricultural space is trying to be successful and run a business. Are there some challenges because I'm a woman? Yeah. The first time I bought my combine, the guy that delivered it, only talked to my husband. And then finally he was like, hey, like, she's the one that this is hers. You need to like be addressing her, so sometimes you just have to say that. But on the flip side, women in ag are continuing to grow. The percentage is continuing to grow, but we're still a minority. So like, I'm not going to hold that truck driver hostage because I'm like, you didn't address me first, like typically women aren't buying combines. So, you just have a conversation, you say, this is mine, and then you move forward from there.
Yeah.
And if you have people that don't want to work with you because you're a woman, you just don't work with them. And again, the power of saying no. I want to work with people that want to work with me. And so we're headed for it.
I feel like if someone doesn't want to work with you solely because you're a woman, then they're probably not the kind of person you want to work with anyway. Like,
yeah. And, I think I've only encountered that like once in my entrepreneurial journey. But I will say is you got to know your stuff, that you maybe not more so than a man, but it's going to highlight if you don't know what's going on or if there's a gap. And I would say, don't be afraid to like say, hey, I'll figure that out. I don't know that answer right now, but I can sure figure it out. And that's opened up a lot of doors for me.
We've talked to a lot of women and they've had similar responses where they may have had to, push and shove their way to the table. But once they get there, people realize they're just farmers like anyone else.
Yeah.
And they deserve the same respect. And most of the time seems like they're given that respect.
At the end of the day, across all industries, I don't think people care if you're a man or you're a woman. They care if you do a good job, period. And so if you do a good job, you're going to have a seat at the table. And if you don't, then you don't deserve a seat at the table. And I don't care what gender you are. So I don't want a woman at the table because they're a woman, you know, like the DEI and stuff like that. Like, I want to be there because I deserve to be there, because I've earned the spot, not because you gave it to me because of my gender. Like, not interested.
I think that wraps things up for us. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thanks for having me.
I loved getting a chance to talk to Melissa, and you know, someone like Melissa, she's so inspiring in that she's got a hand in so many things. Like she said, like she's farming, she is running a business, and she is also helping to, you know, push an entire industry forward that is still kind of just finding its sea legs, I guess. And it's amazing to hear people, and in our case, women on our podcast, who are doing all these things. But I can't help but think sometimes that just, it sounds like so much. So that's why I was happy to hear her say that, like, she's also, as she said, so protective of her peace, because finding that balance is just so important to, you know, maintaining your mental health and preventing burnout.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like there, you know, she was talking about how she's learned to say no a lot. And I think that's something that as I have gotten older, I have been working on that myself, to, like, you know, it's okay to say no. And it's one of my favorite actresses, Elizabeth Olsen, who, she's in Marvel movies, she's in a lot of stuff. Her sisters are pretty famous as well. They're twins. You might have heard of them, Mary-Kate and Ashley. Anyway, but Elizabeth has said in multiple interviews that, like, a kind of mantra she lives by is the phrase, no is a complete sentence. And, you know, I feel like Melissa was kind of saying the same thing, where it's like, you don't have to explain yourself. You can just, it's okay to just say no. And yeah, that's something that I've just been working on in my own life, and being allowing myself to say no.
Yeah, it can be hard, because I think she was kind of getting at two forms of no, which I thought was interesting. One was saying no to things that aren't healthy for you. So saying, like, no, I don't need to, you know, have that third little piece of chocolate because this is post-Halloween, and I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of treats in our house right now that we should probably be saying no to.
A lot of treats in our office currently right now at Lancaster Farming.
But there's also the no you have to say out loud to someone else sometimes. And I feel like that's often the harder no, especially for women, to say. Because I feel like a lot of times we are conditioned to be agreeable and to be of service to others. And so to turn around and just say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to make myself available for that, is something that goes against, I don't know, just something that's been, like, ingrained in us since birth.
Yeah, definitely loved hearing someone who is such a kind of powerhouse type of woman in Melissa, like, really echoing those thoughts. That was good for me to hear. I'll take it. I loved it.
Yeah, she was great. All right, and with that, I think we can wrap things up. Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. If you really like this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions or thoughts about this episode or the podcast in general, you can email us at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us at social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for visiting us at the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Candace.
We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2024 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Wierzbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock. The music you have heard throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.